Hey, all right. In the last video, I walked through the new authentication generator that comes with Ruby on Rails 8. And so if you haven't seen that, you can check out the other video where I walked through all the basics of setting that up. And I showed you everything that you get out of the box with a fresh installation of Rails 8 with the new authentication generator. That gives us a basic sign in flow, like a login flow, but it doesn't include a sign up flow. So new registrations not included out of the box. And we're also going to need a bunch of other things to get our system ready for prime time for any app or product that we want to build. So we want to add the sign up flow. We want to simplify the routes. We're going to add a few more things like letting users set their time zone or even detect their time zone. Users are going to need avatars, and we can even let them use their gravatar if they have that registered on their email address. Users can update their first name and last name, and we're going to need some really nice views and navigation components to get all of this stuff kind of wired up and looking good and ready to use in any typical app. All right, so let's get into it. Like I said, we are picking up where we left off from that other video. So in this app that I called Auth Demo, we have already installed the Rails 8 authentication generation. So actually, before we get started, we do have a couple of requirements. So first is you will need to be running Rails 8. The authentication generator is not available in Rails 7 and below. That's a new feature in Rails 8. So you'll need that. And then you will need to actually generate it and install it. You can see my other video on how to do that. Now, before we actually get into adding our upgrades to the authentication system, we need to do a couple of other things. We're going to need active storage, and we're going to use that for when users upload their avatars. So let's make sure that we have active storage installed on our app. So we'll do Rails active storage install. That's going to give us a migration to migrate. All right, and then we also need to go into our gem file, and you'll see this line, which should be there by default with a fresh Rails installation. If it's not, you can add it. It's image processing. You'll just need to uncomment that and then run bundle install or just bundle. Okay, so active storage is all set. Image processing is all set. We're also going to need to add our instrumental gem. That's for the instrumental components library. That's what we're going to be using to add all of our upgrades to the authentication system, along with some layouts and other components that we'll need along the way. So you can get your copy of instrumental components by going to instrumental.dev, and you'll see the installation instructions there. For now, in this video, I'm just going to use my local version. So this part is going to look a little bit different for you, but you'll see the instructions on instrumental.dev. So I'm just going to put in my local version and bundle that. All right, so I'm going to go back to my routes file, and we're going to look at that. But before I do that, let's actually run the server and just see where we're at. Okay, so super basic. Again, we're just picking up where we left off. We've got and also just as a refresher, we did install a pages controller in the last video, which gave us a home view and a dashboard view. And we're using that home view as our root page here. And then the dashboard view is going to be what users can see after they log in. And this is all core authentication stuff that comes out of the box with Rails 8. We are redirecting to the dashboard if they've already logged in. And if they try to view the dashboard, but they're not logged in, then we're going to redirect them to the login view. All right, so that was all set last time. As you can see, you can go to your session/new. That's the new session view that comes by default with the authentication generator. Now, as I said, it doesn't include a sign-up flow, and so I had to actually create a user using Rails console, and I did that. I'm going to log into that user. Okay, so I have logged in, and now we're looking at our dashboard page, and as I showed you last time, we're showing the user's email address, and we have a simple log out link that I can click here. Okay, super simple. That's all we have out of the box. now let's get this thing ready for prime time, right? So I've installed the instrumental components gem, and the first thing that we are going to do is, well, while we do this, I'm actually going to look at the routes file, and you'll remember that the basic authentication gave us a resource for session and resources for passwords. And you know what? I don't really like these routes, or at least the session route. I just don't like the sign-in being session/new. I would much prefer something simpler like /login. And our sign-up flow is going to be /signup. Nice and simple, really common. So that's part of what we're going to be adding in our generation here. So I'm going to run the instrumental authentication command here. So Rails instrumental : authentication. Now, just a note, whenever you watch videos where I demonstrate the instrumental components stuff, just know that the most up-to-date instructions on all the commands and installation procedures, all of that can be found at instrumental.dev. Your best bet is to check the docs there. We have everything up to date in super detail there. In this video, you're just seeing how it works today at the time of this recording. Some details might be changing by the time that you come around to watching this. So, always double check to the docs at instrumental.dev. But for right now, all we need to do is run Rails instrumental authentication. As you can see, it's already updated our routes. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But first, let's scroll back to see, all the different things that it installed. And I'm going to walk through these piece by piece. But we're actually not complete yet. It's actually asking us, do we want to overwrite our sessions new view? And yes, we do, because we have a new layout and view coming into those. Same thing with passwords new and passwords edit. We're going to approve overwriting those files, and we are all set. So you can kind of scroll back through to see all the different things that have been installed into our project. And now let's just see where we're at. And I'm going to refresh this. And first thing we see is an error for pending migrations, because our authentication upgrades actually added some new migrations. So we're going to go into our DB migrate, and we can see this new one that we've added. We're going to be adding first name, last name, and time zone to the users table. So let's go ahead and migrate that. Refresh. And now we have an error because session/new doesn't work anymore. So that's one of those things that I actually wanted to change, and that's what we did as part of the generation. So if we go back to our routes, you can see what's changed. So we've added a bunch of new routes. This top section for authentication, we now have a route for sign up. That goes to registrations, and we have a registration create. We just tweaked the session routes to remove that session/new, and now we just have login. And then we kept the password routes as they were. We also added a couple of routes for users editing and managing their user profile, and I'm going to show you that later in this video. Okay, so instead of session new, let's change that to login. Okay, now you might see an error like this. What could be happening here is, since we've installed a whole bunch of new stuff, including images and CSS styles, we often need to go in here and stop the server and then do Rails assets clobber and Rails assets pre-compile, and then restart the server with bin dev. Now, you'll find that you need to do that quite often whenever you're changing things like images and CSS styles and CSS classes in your markup, especially if you're using Tailwind CSS, which I am, and that's part of how instrumental components work. It relies on Tailwind. So all of that is there. I just refreshed the asset, the precompiled assets, and I restarted the server. Let's do a hard refresh on here, and there we go. Okay, so now we see our new and improved login view, and we have the same thing at sign up. One of the things that I like to do on any sign up view is to add a little testimonial quote. This is the page where we're trying to get users to sign up for our app. And so we want to add a little bit of social proof there. So you can see it's a much upgraded sign up view than the one that you get out of the box. It's still pretty clean, and you can customize things. We give you a basic logo, which uses the name of your project by default using text and some styling. You can replace that with your logo. We've got the forms all worked out. It pulls in our form styling from instrumental components. It pulls in our buttons component. You can navigate between sign up and sign in, and the reset password views. All of that uses this new authentication layout that's built in. The other thing you'll notice is this kind of wavy thing happening in the background. That is an image from Unsplash. You know what? Let me open up the new layout that we installed in the project. So you'll go into Views, Layouts, Authentication. All right, so here is the authentication view. It's got all the Tailwind styling and markup all built into it. Here is that testimonial quote, so you can come in here and tweak this, put in like a real one, or you can rip it out if you want to. And then down here is the image, which we're pulling in from Unsplash. You can replace that with something else. You can remove it. We're doing a bit of like opacity, background color kind of stuff happening there, so you can tweak that however you want. But yeah, this layout is installed and up and running on your login, your sign up, and your password views. Pretty cool. All right, so let's go ahead and sign up. I'm going to create a new user using our new sign up flow. Let's go ahead and do bc2@test.com, and I'll create a password. I'm going to sign up. And there we go. So I have just created a user. I registered without needing to use the console. It's just built in to our app. And now I'm logged into the dashboard, and let's just see what happened just now. So we installed a controller. And by the way, I want to give credit to Rob Race. He was one of the first bloggers to put out a nice guide on how to add a registrations controller. So used some of that as inspiration for this. So here's the registration controller. And so first thing that you'll need to do here is make sure that you include allow unauthenticated access, and that's built into the one that we generate for you. This is one of those methods that comes with the authentication generator in Rails. And that's what sort of allows users who are not yet authenticated, so people who have not yet registered and they're viewing the new view, like the sign up view for registration, they're not going to be authenticated yet. So we need to allow them access to that and the create action. So we create the user, we start a new session, and then we redirect them to the after authentication URL, and that is defined in controllers concerns authentication. That's another piece that comes with the default authentication. And I went over this in the other video, but you can define that. We're currently sending it to the root URL, which then goes to our pages controller, which tries to render the home. But if you are logged in, it's going to direct you to the dashboard. And so, you'll probably want to reconfigure this depending on how you have your app. But that's how the redirection is happening after the user signs up for an account. All right, so we are logged in, and we're showing the user's email address here. We've got our simple logout link, but this is kind of plain. We want an upgraded layout for the application, but we also need a user menu, a menu for the user to access their profile and edit and manage their profile and their password and their avatar, all of that. So where is all that going to come from? Because we have the pieces in place in the routes and the controller, but we don't have the layout for that. So what I'm going to do here is actually pull in an instrumental layout, which we call a collapsible sidebar. So I'm going to run our collapsible sidebar installer, Rails, instrumental, layouts. And we have a few different layouts available with instrumental components, but the one that I like to use on almost all of our apps is collapsible sidebar. We'll run that. It's going to install a bunch of things like and some of these have already been installed when we added our authentication stuff. So all of that is kind of logged there. We do want to make this our default application layout. So we're going to allow that, or we can name it something else, but I'm going to make it the application layout. So we're going to overwrite that file, and we're all set. So once again, we want to clobber and then recompile assets and restart the server. I actually have those set up in an alias in terminal with just RR. So I'm going to do that. And that clobbers the assets, it recompiles the assets, and it restarts the server for me. Nice and easy. Let's refresh. And here we go. Much better. We've got this sidebar with a navigation. We can continue to add more links to it. We've got our logo there, and this is actually a collapsible sidebar, which is kind of cool. All of this is mobile optimized. All right. And as usual, everything is dark mode as well. All right. So we've got our dashboard, and you know what? I'm going to get rid of this stuff because we don't even need it anymore, because we're going to add a user menu up here at the top right. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, had I done this in a different order, if I had installed the layout first and then installed the authentication upgrades with Instrumental, then it would have actually already added the user menu for me. But since I did it in the reverse order for this video, we did authentication first and then we added the layout. We're going to have to kind of circle back and now add the user piece to this now that we have authentication installed. All right, so let's go ahead and do Rails instrumental authentication user menu. And again, what this is basically just going to do is, like, now that we've already installed our authentication stuff, like our user profile routes and controller and stuff, we need to add a little menu into the layout. So we're just going to add that in. It will kind of log out what it did for us. It found the mobile menu and the user menu, and it added. And you know what? Let's once again, let's recompile and restart the server. And we'll do a hard refresh. And there we go. So now we have our user menu at the top. You'll see up here at the top right. We're seeing the user's email address, and we're seeing a kind of a placeholder avatar with their initials in it. Because this email address, if I go to the user menu here, you know, the avatar is a placeholder because we're not yet applying an avatar. And this email address doesn't have a gravatar set. Let me come back to that. Before we get into all the details here, I just want to show you that now that we have this user profile here in the corner, and we also have the breadcrumbs installed, if I go back home, now if we go into mobile mode and we open up the mobile menu, we also have the user links in the mobile menu as well. So all of that comes, you know, standard built into our layouts from Instrumental. Again, everything is always dark mode ready as well. Okay, just wanted to show you that. So let's go back into this user profile editing screen, which we give you when you installed authentication stuff. So now we have a full user profile, and now we can also add a first name and last name and the avatar. Now, coming back to the avatar for a moment. So if the user had signed up using an email address that is already registered with gravatar.com, which lets you assign a default avatar image to an email address. You know, for example, here is one of my testing email addresses that actually is registered with Gravatar. And so you can see once I changed it to that, Peter Griffin shows up as my avatar. And that's the image that I have registered at Gravatar. So that means when users sign up for your app, if they are already registered on Gravatar, they will have a image avatar already assigned to their user. They don't even need to change anything. So that's pretty cool. But if they are not a Gravatar user and they're just using an email address that is not registered, then they can upload a custom avatar image. So let's go ahead and do that. It's going to show me a preview, and I can click update. So the way that works is we use Rails active storage in order for that to work. We also give you a remove link, and that will clear the avatar off of the user. you'll notice that we have initials automatically generated, and that's based on the email address at first. But if they set a first name and last name, let's say to something else like test user, now the initials say TU, and they show up here as well. And we're showing the first name, last name here now instead of the email address. So all of that is powered by some helper methods that we have built in, which we have put into the project. So let's take a look at what's happening there. First, we have an avatars helper we put in here. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but basically we are using this to put in the avatar image, and we check to see if one exists on the user. Actually, while we're at it, let's check out the user model, because we also added has one attached avatar to the user model. And we also added a couple of methods on the user. So we've got initials, which will check for a first name and last name. If that doesn't exist, then it'll use the email address. And we also have a method called name, which will output their first name and or last name. And if those don't exist, then it would output email address. And that's what we are showing here. So we're saying like user name, right? And test user is what outputs, because we have first name, last name. Okay, so moving down, we have time zone. You'll notice it says Eastern time zone. I'm actually here sitting in the Eastern time zone in Connecticut in the United States. And so when I signed up, it automatically detected that I'm in this time zone, and it set that on my user profile. We've got a selection here so the user can change that if they need to, but most of the time they don't need to because it detects it. How do we do that? Well, we have installed a Stimulus.js controller into the project that's in controllers, components, time zone controller. So this is attached to the sign up form that we've added. And you usually don't even need to touch this. What it does is it detects the current time zone that the user is in, and it sets that in a hidden field, and then it saves that on the user when they register. This sort of like some of the time zones here in the US. You might need to add some additional lines to this. Most of the time you don't even need to. But that's basically all set. So it automatically detects the time zone. That's pretty cool. What else? All right. So here we have the edit password screen. So I actually like to separate out the profile, like the place where I'm managing my profile stuff, and having the manage password as like a totally separate view. Because most of the time, if I'm just changing, my avatar or my name or whatever, I don't want to change my password, right? If I want to change my password, then I want to change my password. And that's a separate job to be done, a separate page that I want. So that's here. It's set up so that it is going to require the current password, and it's going to require the user to type in the same new password twice. It'll validate all of that, and it's good to go. While I'm here, this view that we gave you also includes our component for sub-navigations. That's what's happening here. So we've got our main navigation here, and then our sub-navigation here. And what's pretty cool about that is when we go down to mobile, the sub-navigation turns into a drop-down menu, and it even shows you which page you're currently viewing. So we've got a stimulus controller built into that. We've got all the partials and views all set up for that out of the box. It just works. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Same thing with the breadcrumbs navigation. That came installed as well, along with the things that we installed today. So you'll see that. And that too is a little bit optimized for mobile. You'll see when we go down, it sort of simplifies. So yeah, all these little details are just kind of figured out and popped right into your project for you. So now we have like a full user sign up flow, sign in flow, registration flow, avatars, time zones, first name, last name, password management, profile management, navigation menus for our users. And this thing is starting to look like a real application. So now we can just move right along into building some actual features that the users can use. So that's pretty exciting. All of that, again, comes kind of like bundled in with instrumental.dev. Hopefully you can see how some of this was put together. And as always, we have all of the details mapped out and documented in excruciating detail at instrumental.dev. You can see the latest stuff there. If you have any questions or requests for other things that you'd like to see here on the channel, drop them in the comments. And look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks for watching.